Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. It's Grace, and the video that I'm going to be doing today is some sci-fi fantasy standalone recommendations, because we all know how sci-fi fantasy can somehow feel overwhelmingly like there are always new series to start, you're always in the middle of series, everybody is never caught up on any of their series. And so I think that I'm always looking for recommendations for standalone books that I can read and enjoy. And I love series as much as the next person, but sometimes you just want to finish a story when you finish a book. I can only go off of what I have read, but I thought that I would try and give you some recommendations of the best standalones that I've read recently, so in the past year or so, and try and explain some things about them so that you can decide whether these might be books that you would want to pick up. So I'm gonna start us off with the only middle grade or like YA that I have on this list. The rest are all adult books, but that is going to be Elatsoe by Darcy Little Badger. This is a pretty young YA novel, and the setup for this is that our main character, Elatsoe, comes from a family that can communicate with spirits. So for example, Ellie, or Elatsoe, has her dog that has passed, but basically is still her companion as a ghost. So this family has this ability, and this world is sort of like imbued with magic. That is just the magic of this world, where it has been shaped by like monsters, myths, and legends, and those are just something that people accept as true. And the storyline that we follow Elatsoe in this book is the fact that her cousin is killed, but nobody is sure whether his death was accidental or not. And Elatsoe and her friend want to investigate this more, and so they do. And there is some really interesting mysteries to be uncovered with what they find when they go to the small town where the supposed accident happened. Elatsoe was a pretty quick read. It's about 400 pages, I think, between 350 and 400, so it's not overly long. It has great indigenous representation, and it takes the magic and it takes Elatsoe's family and it intertwines the myths of her family's past into some really, really interesting like stories that supplement this plot. And it also has a really great friendship in it too, as well as some asexual representation. So there are a lot of great things in this book, and if you are interested in YA, even if it does read a little bit younger, this was a story that I really enjoyed. Next up, speaking of short, I'm going to talk about a novella, and that is going to be The Emperor's Soul by Brandon Sanderson. And I debated putting Sanderson works on this list because, as people probably know, as a lot of people know, Brandon Sanderson has a lot of his works existing in the Cosmere, which is an interconnected universe for him, where different books will take place on different worlds, but they do take place in the same universe, and they can be connected if you're paying close enough attention, and sometimes in more overt ways as well. But I wanted to include first The Emperor's Soul on this list because, like I said, it's a novella, it's very short, and if you want to dip your toes into Brandon Sanderson's works, I think that The Emperor's Soul would be a fantastic way to do it because, well, I can't even say too much about it because it's so short, but the problem that we're presented with at the start of The Emperor's Soul is we start off with a main character who is very skilled in this magic system called forgery, and she is approached to actually forge the Emperor a new soul because he has been in an accident and they need her help to basically forge his personality onto his body. and it's very interesting. It's very quick. It is so tightly done because a lot of people say that Brandon Sanderson writes long books, and he does, but he managed to do so much in like less than 200 pages in this novella. I thought it was really impressive. So if you're looking for a quick read, it's perfect, and you can get a taste for what his characters are like and what his magic systems are like, and a little bit of what his world building is like, but this story is a lot more contained. It's not quite as much of the world building, but it is really, really enjoyable. And then, just because I may as well keep the Brandon Sandersons together, another one of his works in the Cosmere is Warbreaker. So Warbreaker is, as of now, a standalone. It is supposed to be getting a sequel at some point, but Brandon Sanderson is a busy man, and I don't know when he plans to write the Warbreaker sequel. Now, I'll be the first to say that Warbreaker is honestly not my personal favorite of Brandon Sanderson's works, but I think that, sort of in the same vein as The Emperor's Soul, if you're looking to try him out and you're looking for something a little bit longer than a novella, Warbreaker could be a great place to start. The setup for Warbreaker is that you have basically two nations that oppose each other, and one of them has this capital city called Tatilier, which is this really vibrant, colorful, magic-filled place where there are things called breaths that every human has that are sort of like a soul, but not quite. And basically there are these gods or godlike beings who take tribute from the people of the city in the form of breaths, and they are considered divine, and they have their own kind of court and politics, but sitting even above them is the God King. And so this city in this nation of Hallandren is opposed to Idris and the Idrians, and this is where the former royal family of humans have been exiled to. And so in order to keep the peace, they are sending one of their daughters to be in an arranged marriage with the God King. So this is kind of where we start our story, because one of the daughters of this family has been sent to this strange foreign city to be betrothed to the God King, and her sister basically wants to go and save her and attempts to follow her into this city and try and rescue her. And so there's a lot of colors in this book. It's a color-based magic system. This really shows you the way that Brandon Sanderson likes to build his worlds and likes to build his magic systems. And there are a wide range of characters in this book as well. Warbreaker has a lot more page count with which to do that, because this one is around 650, so we are getting into the, Brandon Sanderson likes to write long books territory, but Warbreaker is a standalone, like I mentioned, and it is a great way to introduce yourself to his works. Next on my list is going to be The Sword of Kaigen by M.L. Wang, and you may have heard me talk about this in my favorite books of Q3 video, because I read this in July and I really enjoyed it. So I am talking about it again here for a second time. So this one is also a little bit long, coming in at around 600 pages, give or take. But basically, I would recommend The Sword of Kaigen to anybody who is looking for something Asian inspired, something with elemental magic, something with strong family themes and themes of motherhood. And I really enjoyed Sword of Kaigen for how much of an emotional story it was. So if you like a balance between your character moments and the action, this would be a really good book for you to try out. I think it balances that really well. And basically, the setup for the Sword of Kaigen is that the Sword of Kaigen is a landmass. It's basically like a peninsula where these people live who are basically a warrior class, and they subscribed to sort of old-fashioned ways of life. They haven't quite been left behind by the rest of the empire because they still have some modern technology, but they subscribe to things that would be considered a little bit more old-fashioned. And during this book, the curtain is drawn back a little bit, and the people of this island, who are meant to be protectors, they kind of start to see what is really happening in other countries foreign to them, and that there might be some threats and some information that they didn't know about because they've been sort of secluded for a lot of their life. So like I mentioned, the magic system in this one is very elemental. The people of the Sword of Kaigen are able to manipulate water magic, and people from elsewhere in the Empire are able to manipulate air magic, and the way that it's presented is really cool. But really the core of this book is family relationships and exploring emotional ties. So Sword of Kaigen was really, really great. It had a great emotional impact, and if you are interested in any of the things that I just mentioned, I think that you would really like it. So next up on the list is going to be The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman, and this one is very like magical realism vibes, and it's also very short. This is the illustrated edition, so it actually looks a little bit bigger because there are pages in here that don't even have any text on them. But this copy of The Ocean at the End of the Lane is only about 330 pages, and I'm pretty sure I read it in one sitting, and I was just absolutely sucked in by it. So this is another short option if you are looking for shorter books, and Neil Gaiman just crafts such an atmospheric experience with this. I don't even want to say too much about it, but basically The Ocean at the End of the Lane deals with the story of a boy, or a man, who is visiting a place where he used to live and recounting time that he spent there as a boy, and adventures that he went on, and a girl that he met, and the ocean at the end of the lane, which is a pond, but that seemed larger than life when he was a child, and how some supernatural or magical things may have happened, and he's kind of exploring them through his memories. So the thing that I loved about The Ocean at the End of the Lane above all was that it has this very whimsical feeling, but it's also almost a horror novel from the perspective of a child. This is one that I really, really want to reread, and I may actually do so soon just because of its short length. So this is a very high recommendation for me, and it's been one of my favorite books of the year so far. Finally, the last book on my list is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. So I read this just under a year ago. I read it around Christmas of 2020, and this one is historical fantasy. Actually, it's sort of a mix of modern and historical fantasy, but our setup for this one is that we follow Addie LaRue when she is, I think, like 23 in the year of 17 something, like the early 18th century, and she does not want to marry the man that she is set up to marry, and she runs away from her family, and she basically sells her soul, makes a deal in the dark woods that night that says that basically Addie wants to be free to live as she chooses, and she makes this deal not realizing that what the darkness is actually going to give her is that she is going to be totally free to live a very solitary life, because nobody is going to be able to remember her. So if she meets someone, as long as she's in their sight, they can remember her, but as soon as she passes out of their sight, she also passes out of their memory. So she has destined herself for a very lonely life until one day, almost 400 years later, or 300 years, I guess, she meets somebody who can actually remember her. So I loved this book. I thought that the premise was very interesting, and I really liked the execution of it as well. So I would recommend Addie LaRue to anybody who likes a slowly paced book, because this is very much a character study, which I love and I enjoyed, but I know that if you go into this one with the wrong expectations, you might be disappointed. So it is slowly paced, but it is very interesting, and it also offers glimpses into Addie's life at different points throughout history. And I don't know, I love a quiet story like that that sometimes. And this one again is not overly long. I think it's about 450 pages, and I think I read it in 2 days just because I was so captured by it. And I was drawn in by the characters, and I really loved Addie, and that was what drew me to this journey. So that is the last of my sci-fi fantasy standalone recommendations for now. I'm hoping to do another one of these videos once I read more standalones, but right now I'm sort of focused on catching up on some of my series. But like I mentioned earlier in the video, I do love a good standalone, so I wanted to share some of my recent favorites with you. If you have read any of these books and you want to let me know what you think, or if you want to talk about them, please comment down below. If you haven't read any of these and you'd like to know more of them, or things that I didn't mention, or if you have any more questions, also feel free to comment down below. I really hope that you enjoyed this video. Like if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more content from me, and I hope that you have a fantastic rest of your day. Bye!